welcome. To my students who are in person and are watching this at the same time that I'm making these videos, I miss you guys, and I'm wishing you well. I'm letting you know that I'm doing pretty well, and I'm creating content for you guys so that you feel a sense of normal. You get to see a teacher's face, hear a teacher's voice, and hopefully that adds to your overall wellness. To anyone that might be watching this who doesn't know me, I'm Mrs. Hulawat. I am a credentialed English teacher. I've been teaching English for 10 years. I majored in English and I love the English language, studying literature, writing, all of that. So I'm trying to create content that's going to help my students, but not just us. Anyone can use my videos during these school closures and shelter in place. For this video, I'm going to be using a couple of different reading strategies. The one that might be newest to you guys is levels of questioning. So if you haven't watched that video, I'll put a card onto this one so that you can go ahead and watch that. But you might actually be able to kind of get the concept as we go through. So maybe go back and watch that if not everything makes sense. To get the most out of this video, I asked you guys to bring a poem with you. I chose my poem. It is Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Usually this is a poem I look at about this time of year with my students, and so I thought I'd make a video to make myself feel a little bit more normal and like I'm in the classroom, and deliver some content perhaps that I would have gone over with my students anyway. You could go grab this poem. If you don't want to work with this poem, you can grab another poem. This is only 8 lines and we're going to make a lot out of it. I don't recommend grabbing a poem that's too long. A Shakespearean sonnet would work great. Langston Hughes has some great poems that would work for a follow along with this video. Maya Angelou, Gary Soto, Sylvia Plath. These are all some really, really great poets who've written some poetry that's perfect. So what I'm going to have you do is pause my video, go to Google, find yourself a poem, and the way to get the most out of this is if you were able to print it out so that you could write all over it, because we're going to make it look like my students like to say a unicorn vomited all over it. It's going to be colorful and fun and messy. But if you've got some sort of electronic app that lets you annotate right there on the screen, go ahead and use that. So go grab a poem and come right back. Annotating is a great reading strategy for readers of all ages, children and adults, and books and texts of all genres. These are books that I marked up in college, and you can see that I had a pretty meticulous style about it, and this probably looks a lot like what my students will see under the document camera. One thing I love about annotation is that when we annotate, even if we're following along with a teacher, it's like a fingerprint. Nobody's paper, nobody's text looks exactly the same as the person next to them, even if we're writing down all the same stuff. We might use different wording or even just different colors or write something in a different place. So it becomes highly personal and highly unique. Plus, when you go back and look, your brain takes ownership over the notes that you made, and you better understand what you read when you review it. The more difficult the text, the more you should annotate. You probably wouldn't be annotating stuff that you're reading for entertainment or that's pretty approachable, but if you've been assigned something and it's really difficult, you probably want to annotate. Annotation isn't just for literary scholars. This is a textbook from Mr. Hulawat's pile of college textbooks, all marked up, and he was a mechanical engineering major. This can even be done with ebooks. It's not my preference, that's why I don't have a whole lot of examples, or why I don't have any examples, but it is something you can do electronically as well. I do not recommend doing this with every single page of every single book. However, I'll admit that there are some books that I have marked up every single page. Areopagitica by John Milton is one of my absolute favorites from college. Thank you so much to Dr. Vanessa for assigning it and teaching it. It still is one of my absolute favorite books. This is another one, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I marked this one up like crazy. I had to write a pretty big essay about it, and also I loved it. I think that the first maybe 20 pages of marking, you're feeling pretty pretty tired, but once you really start noticing patterns and getting into it, then you can't help it anymore. Also, legend has it that cats prefer to lounge on annotated books over books that have not been annotated. Hi everyone, so I'm going to try to treat this sort of like a document camera the way I would at work. I hope that everything looks pretty clear to you on your screen. I'm going to tell you what I've got here first. So I've got my highlighters. I don't know if I'll use all of them. Same thing with my pens. Thank you, Mrs. Denews, for the big pack of pens. That is what these ones are from. I like to use different colors because it actually goes back to when I was in middle school. It was one of the things that made me want to read, that made me want to annotate and add my ideas and thoughts to the page to help me better understand what's there. And I actually started doing it as a theater student and highlighting my lines and maybe adding, what kind of emotion I was supposed to say that line with. It really helped, and when I started applying it to language arts, it was a big, big help. So what you don't see that's off screen is my computer. I am using my computer to look up dictionary definitions because I just think it's going to be a little bit faster for the sake of the video. I know a lot of my students at home are like, but she makes us use the dictionaries in class. And yeah, I do. Being able to find a word in a dictionary is an important skill worth practicing. It practices detail, noticing the details, but for right now I don't want to make this video overly long. It's probably going to be pretty long as is, so I'm going to use an online dictionary. So first we're just going to read the poem, take in the feeling of it, and perhaps maybe you'll pick up the meaning of it as we read too. So let's see. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. The first thing I always do when I read something is I kind of just take it in, just the emotion behind it. And then I go to, all right, what are some words I didn't understand? Because that really does help open up meaning. Words that pretty commonly middle schoolers don't know, or not all middle schoolers know, might be the word hue. I know that seasoned readers and good readers and active readers will probably be able to figure out meanings of these words based on context, but I want these reading strategies to be for everybody, including people who maybe struggle with some reading. Another word worth looking up would be subsides. I had a student once read that word to me as subsidies one year, and it lets me know that we can't make the assumption that everybody understands every word that is put in front of them. This word Eden has a capital E, so I'm going to assume it's some sort of proper noun of some sort, but I might not understand that reference. If depending on your family background, you might not get that reference, and so it's very important to maybe go look it up to help you better understand the overall poem. The word grief might be something, it just doesn't seem like you could figure it out based on the context, especially if you don't understand what Eden might be. So I'm going to put that down as a word to look up. So I'm going to go pull up the definitions right away in order. The dictionary definition for hue, there's a couple here. And the one I'm going to use, it says gradation of color. And it seems to be discussing color in the previous line, so I'm going to write that down. As I'm doing this with my own poem, why don't you guys go ahead and do this with your poem? So if there's a word that you need to look up while I'm talking and looking up my words, go ahead and do that for a couple of the words that you might need to look up in your poem. So gradation of color. gradation, as in like, you know, a wheel of color, like different shades of blue, different shades of pink, I'm guessing. The next word is subsides. And we can maybe figure out from the root word sub, meaning under, but the dictionary definition means to sink or fall to the bottom. To sink or fall to the bottom. Sorry about my handwriting, especially when I'm talking and saying something different from what I'm writing. My students will attest to this, especially on the dot cam. My writing gets atrocious, and I'm so sorry. The point of this is for you guys to just see the reading strategy, not necessarily copy down what I've got. Okay, next word is Eden. Let's see if I can get a dictionary definition of Eden. The garden where, according to the account in Genesis, Adam and Eve first lived. I'm going to simplify that definition for you guys. And I'm just going to say the paradise that Adam and Eve lived in. Just to simplify it for all students of any particular cultural or religious background. Eden was thought to be in Christian stories and the stories in Christianity about how the world came to be, a paradise that Adam and Eve lived in. But the story behind that, my 8th graders will know that because we did talk about this biblical story and how it tied into our story for Flowers for Algernon. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. They were not supposed to eat from the tree of knowledge, and then they got kicked out for eating from the tree of knowledge. So very simplified version of the story. If you are not Christian and you're kind of wondering, oh no, I hope she's not getting religious. I am not. When we study English literature, the Bible is just such a widely read book in English literature that a lot of authors, such as Robert Frost, will make references to the Bible so that readers who very have likely read the Bible, especially in earlier times, will immediately understand the reference. So, you know, if you were probably living in Robert Frost's time, you probably would have completely understood this reference right away. But I have a very diverse classroom, and so I want to respect that and make sure I front load any knowledge you might need. The last word here is grief. So looking up the word grief. Cause of such suffering, deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement, annoying or playful criticism. I think that one might be a little too light. I'm going to go with a cause of such suffering. A cause of such, whoops, suffering. There goes my pen. Okay. The next thing I like to do, once I have gotten the definitions for the words that I think are difficult, is a second rereading. So let's see if we can reread it, and now we've got that layer of defined words. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Oh, of course, speaking of golden things. Speaking of golden things, look at who showed up. All right, buddy, I'm going to let you, here. No, it's okay. Just right there is fine. My Holden. But only so an hour, then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. The next thing I like to do is I like to write one question per level, and in some cases I like to write two. So I'm going to start with a level 1 question. Level 1 would be, what sank to grief? I like to write level 1 questions about details that seem important, that seem harder to understand, because then I could build a level 2 question off of it. A lot of people like to write level 1 questions like, oh, what is the title of the poem, or how many lines are in the poem, which, yeah, actually are completely worthy questions. But if you ask about something such as Eden that seems kind of important, it's capitalized, it's a reference to a major story, I like to take note of that. Another level 1 question would be, what cannot stay? And that's nothing gold. Sorry if my cat is jumping around during my video. It's the time of day when he starts getting really playful. On to perhaps a level 2 question. Level 2 question, whenever you see colors in literature, green, gold, you want to think about, okay, what is the author trying to say? This is what we call literary motifs, and with different colors come different meanings. So a couple of meanings for a level 2 question. What meanings does green have? As I'm doing this, go ahead and write questions about your poem. This is meant to be a follow along. You'll probably get pretty bored watching this video if you're not doing something yourself. So what meaning does green have in general? And here in the literature, and gold. Actually, these might be, you know what? We're calling this a level 3 question. This is also a level 3 question. What meanings does gold have? So, hey, even I'm not perfect with the levels of questioning. I have to catch myself. So what meanings does gold have? I started writing a worthy question, thought it was level 2, decided it's level 3. We're going to go with that. Here is a level 2 question based on that. Level 2 questions are the ones that really help us understand the literature, and we are starting to get a little messy here, and that's okay. Level 2, how can green be gold? What's up with that? They are 2 different colors. A couple things I want to point out, just because I am an English teacher and I am a little bit of a nerd, I'm going to give you a second. Do you guys see an example of personification? Time's up. You've got an example of personification right here, as in nature trying to hold on to something. This is personification. I like to, figuring out figurative language is kind of a level 2 item, so personification. And perhaps this line about Eden might also be considered personification if you interpret it to them referring to Eden as a person who can feel grief, so that might also be a good example. All right, I'm going to try to fit in another level 2 question, maybe somewhere later, because it's good to kind of spread them out and make sure that we are asking questions throughout, and not just coming to an understanding of a particular moment. And I'm going to try to maybe do a connection between these 2 important details. So I'm going to write it sideways. Level 2. How are Eden and nature related? Perhaps. And then I'm going to add one more level 2 down here, kind of building off of a level 1 question I wrote. I wrote, what cannot stay? For level 2, I'm going to ask, why can nothing gold stay? Okay, if you're looking to take a break, this is a good spot to pause or to go and work on your own poem and then come right back so that we could go to the next step. I have switched back to a clean copy of the poem just so that we could get a little bit of perspective. And if you've got a clean copy of your poem somewhere, maybe on the original webpage where you found it or something, it's a great idea to look back at yours. So having done all the notes that we just did, I want to reread the poem and see if any more meaning jumps out at me or if any loose ends kind of get tied together. One other thing about Robert Frost is while his poems used a lot of nature imagery, he was kind of sneakily writing about the human experience. So as we do this reread, what I'd like you to do is see if you can, even if there's not a human in the story, see if you can figure out how is he talking about the human experience? What is he saying about what it's like to be human? Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. Are you seeing any meaning? I'm going to switch back to my noted up copy because I think that if you didn't see it on that reading, and maybe you did, and wonderful, I'm going to be using my notes to back up what I see. Now, like I said, this is so much more fun with students in the room. Usually we have a great classroom discussion where students present to me their ideas, their connections, and it's way more fun than doing a lecture form, tutorial form on camera, but this is kind of what we got right now, and the whole point is to create a resource for you or for other teachers. So what I'm going to do is a line by line what my husband calls English to English translation, where yes, it's written in English. However, the English is coded, and so to do an English to English translation is to take the English it's written in and translate it into the meaning, the level 2 meaning, or perhaps the level 3 meaning that the author intends. So this first line, nature's first green is gold. Now I asked, how can green be gold? Well, when we think about nature's first green, maybe they're talking about that innocence. When we think about the color green, we think about plants. We also think about jealousy. I just don't think that one applies here. We also think about innocence. We use the color green to refer to innocence and when a person lacks experience. And then gold is oftentimes used with riches, jewelry. It's a symbol for first place and perfection, value, beauty. And one year I had a student point out to me that the element of gold is actually very soft and malleable and delicate. And I think that applies here as well. So nature's first green is gold. It's probably saying that that bud, and I'm going to try to put up a picture of from my garden here, that bud, when it's all wrapped up in the green leaves before the petals have bloomed, that's a golden moment. That is when the plant is very innocent. And the way this might apply to humans is, well, when you think about childhood, particularly very small children, babies, you know, they're born, they have to be constantly protected. They don't know too much about the world already, and that innocence is valuable. It's perfect. It's beautiful. And in a lot of ways, it's very delicate, moldable, and very easily lost. Which the second line, her hardest hue, her hardest shade or gradation of color to hold, that innocence is very easily lost. It's hard to hold on to because you cannot stop a child from growing. Her early leaves of flower, I think, is almost a parallel line to green is gold. There might be other interpretations of this that I'm open to, but that early leaf, that bud, is valuable and delicate and transient, doesn't last. But only so an hour. Now that hour, it's not quite literal unless you're talking about that kind of flower that blooms in the middle of the night once a year for only an hour. But I think hour is figurative for a short amount of time. I do have a couple flowers sitting on my table right now that have lasted about 5 days, but they're just saying that you can't hold on to that innocence for a long time. Then leaf subsides to leaf. What this makes me think of, to sink or fall to the bottom, I think about the season of fall. I think about the time when everything is falling to make room for something new, something green, and something innocent. And this kind of applies to the cycle of life, the way that humans are born, they live their lives, they grow old, they pass away, and then new people are born every day, and it's that cycle of life. And there's nothing, it's not stating that that's good or bad, it's not celebrating, it's not it maybe is lamenting it, but it's pointing out that that's the truth of life. So Eden sank to grief. This story of Adam and Eve is pretty much a commentary on the human experience itself. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge and broke a rule, they did two things that we all do. They did something wrong, and we all do something wrong in our lives, and they ate from the tree of knowledge. They gained knowledge, which is something that we all do as we grow and lose our innocence. And so that story of Adam and Eve is a commentary on the overall human experience about how we get kicked out of our little paradises, our little places of innocence as children, and then move into a world where we have to work, we have to deal with challenges, and we're no longer innocent. It's very much like that moment Eden sank to grief. We all go through that. So dawn goes down today. This is a symbol for, I think, perhaps the author's or speaker of the poem's interpretation of whether or not it's a good or bad thing. Dawn, usually the sun rises. Dawn rises into day, but the author uses the word goes down to day. Now, in this case, day is kind of seen as a bad thing, much like Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden and had to toil and work, and they grew old and they grew sick and they died. Much like we do, in that dawn, no matter what the day it is, in the dawn, you haven't faced the challenges of the day yet. The day's new, the day is fresh, the day is innocent, and you haven't gone to work yet, you don't have to get up yet. Day brings all the toils. Daytime is a sad time, even if the sun is up in the sky. According to this poem, of course, another poem might actually celebrate this loss of innocence by highlighting the gaining of knowledge, but this poem seems to be kind of lamenting that loss of innocence. And then the sentence, the line of this poem that kind of solidifies everything, and that basically every line is saying in its own way, nothing gold can stay, nothing perfect, nothing beautiful, nothing valuable, nothing innocent can stay. So what I've done is, if I were to write a paragraph about this poem, I've already pretty much written my paragraph. The only things I'd really need to do is topic sentence, figure out which line works best for me. My analysis is all written for me. So that is one of the huge benefits of annotation, especially if I'm going to write. I've pretty much done my writing already. I just need to organize it. So I hope that this video helped, and that seeing how to apply some of these reading strategies in writing and engaging with the text is really helping someone out there, especially those of you guys during the school closures who have to work on stuff without teacher guidance. Hopefully this gave you some tools to use. This is a tedious thing to do, annotation, especially when we're annotating a small piece of text. You want to dig in and get everything you can out of it. Now, there are situations where annotating is not practical, especially if you're reading just for entertainment. I mean, I'll still highlight a quote or something that really jumps out at me, but I don't do this with everything I read. However, everything I teach, I annotate it. So if you're going to become a teacher, or you're being asked to teach some sort of material to someone else, it's a great idea to annotate. If you are reading fluently, something for entertainment or something that you've been assigned, and you come across a passage that seems important but is kind of difficult to understand, this is a great point to apply that strategy. So maybe not to the whole book like I have done. I usually only do it when I have to, but to particular places within a story or prose, that's going to help you out a lot. So to my students that I would normally be seeing in class and on campus right now, I really miss you guys, and I hope you're doing well, you and your families. To students who don't know me but are maybe watching this video because someone has assigned it to them, or you just stumbled across it and find it helpful, I'm wishing you well too, as I know that we are dealing with school closures all over the place. All right, guys, don't forget to click like and subscribe, and in the comments below, let's be a community of sharing. Why don't you share a reading strategy with me that maybe I didn't talk about this video but can try out for myself or work into a future video. Bye, guys.